When I walked into the house and saw my husband sitting silently on the sofa, eyes glued to his phone with that heavy look on his face, I knew right away he was heartbroken again. And this time, I couldn't stop the corner of my lips from curling up. I'm Sarah, and this is my story. What about you? If you were in my shoes, would you stay silent and watch? Or would you smirk, knowing the cheater finally got a taste of loneliness? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to hit subscribe. Your support helps me tell more raw, real stories about truth, betrayal, and the unexpected twists life throws our way. On the way to the hospital for my prenatal checkup, James Sullivan's phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw a familiar name flashing. The woman's voice on the other end was sweet, with a hint of playfulness, begging him to come right away. I kept my eyes on the scenery outside the window, the trees passing by in a blur, just like my mood. James turned to me, looking uneasy, his brows furrowed tightly. "I'm busy right now. Can it wait a bit?" His voice carried a trace of confusion, but I knew he was just trying to come up with an excuse. He opened his mouth to say something, but then stopped as if any explanation would be pointless. I lowered my eyes, my voice steady and calm like flowing water. "You should go." "I'll be fine." James froze for a second, surprised. He pulled over, the engine of the sleek black Mercedes-Benz still growling like it was urging him on. "Then go carefully by yourself." "Call me if anything happens," he said quickly, as if saying that would be enough to ease his guilt. I didn't respond, just gave a small nod and waved down a taxi. That "call me if anything happens" was just a polite formality. We both knew it. When James was with Lauren Hayes, even if I drained my phone battery calling him, he never picked up. The Mercedes roared off like an arrow, leaving me standing there on the curb. I didn't bother looking back. I got in the taxi and headed straight to the hospital. This wasn't the first time I'd gone to a prenatal appointment alone. The roads, the clinic, the paperwork, it was all as familiar as breathing. In the exam room, the doctor was reviewing the ultrasound, her eyes scanning the faint outlines of the baby. My phone vibrated. The screen showed Lauren Hayes. I answered, hearing the sound of water flowing on the other end. Her voice was laced with provocation. "Sarah Thompson, guess what James is doing right now?" I set the ultrasound paper down on the table, my voice flat. "Probably showering, getting ready to have fun with you." "What? Am I part of your little game too?" There was silence for a few seconds. Maybe Lauren didn't expect me, the legal wife, to be so calm, not crying or screaming after finding out about the affair. My indifference threw her off. Then, like she was regaining her confidence, she gritted her teeth, her voice cold and sharp. "You're getting a checkup today, right?" But just one call from me, and he ran straight here. "Sarah, as a woman, isn't it pathetic that you can't even keep your husband's heart?" I let out a dry laugh, my finger tapping lightly on the glass table. "I don't need his heart, Lauren. Just his money is enough. And you, sure, you have his heart. But the money he spends on you? It's marital property. Lauren Hayes, you'd better be smart. If I ever sue you, you'll have to pay it all back." Silence. Just heavy, annoyed breathing on the other end. Finally, Lauren hung up, probably too furious to speak. The doctor, who had unintentionally overheard the entire conversation, put the ultrasound sheet down and gave a faint smile. "Pregnant women shouldn't get upset. Your emotional control is impressive." I waved it off, my voice gentle but tinged with sarcasm. "My husband's mistress is dying to provoke me into a miscarriage. Over time, you get used to it." The doctor hesitated, her eyes showing both curiosity and sympathy. "And yet, you're still having his child?" I shrugged, my lips curving into a smile. "He's rich, isn't he?" The doctor fell silent, probably unsure how to respond. But honestly, that answer was just a joke. Having this baby had nothing to do with money. When I first got pregnant, I hadn't even heard of Lauren Hayes. Back then, I naively thought this baby might save our crumbling marriage. But later, I realized, when love is gone, nothing can fix it. Not a baby. Even if I had 10 kids, James Sullivan's love wouldn't come back to me. But it's okay. Luckily, I've found happiness elsewhere now. The sound of the wooden door opening pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned around and saw a man, sweaty, breathing heavily like he had run the whole way. His white t-shirt was wrinkled, jeans plain, but his face stood out so much that the casualness became a kind of charm. His eyes sparkled, and a bright smile lit up his face. "I'm late," he said, his voice tinged with guilt but warm. I smiled, a wave of relief washing through my chest. "No, you're right on time. You came just when I needed you." I gently patted the wrinkled white t-shirt he was wearing, feeling the damp fabric soaked with sweat under my fingertips. "That $600 shirt you're wearing looks like it cost 60. What a waste," I teased. But warmth surged in my chest, seeing how rushed he'd come. Noah Carter held my hand, his grip warm and steady. "I was in such a hurry." "The moment you texted, I ran straight out the door." He looked down at his feet, eyes wide in surprise. "Oh, God, my socks are on backward." I couldn't help but smile. The doctor standing nearby froze, glancing back and forth between me and Noah, like he was trying to make sense of this unexpected situation. I felt a little embarrassed, my face flushed hot, and quickly explained, This is my boyfriend." The corners of the doctor's mouth twitched, like he wanted to laugh but held back, his eyes showing amusement mixed with surprise. Noah Carter quickly leaned in closer to the exam table, his voice full of concern. "Doctor, is there anything wrong with this checkup?" The doctor cleared his throat, reined in his curiosity, and returned to his professional tone. "Her body's been slightly anemic, so she'll need to pay closer attention in the later stages." He began explaining in detail, his voice steady and clear. Noah listened intently, phone in hand with the notes app open, fingers flying as he typed everything down. Whenever something didn't make sense, he'd pause, frown, and ask the doctor to repeat it slowly. His eyes were laser-focused, like this was the most important thing in the world. By the end of the session, the doctor's expression had turned somewhat complex, his gaze at Noah filled with admiration and surprise. "Your boyfriend really takes care of you." I nodded, my voice warm. "Yes, much better than my husband ever did." On the drive home, Noah Carter drove slowly, his right hand occasionally leaving the wheel to lightly touch mine. He couldn't hold it in, his voice laced with frustration and worry. "When will you finally divorce him?" I turned to look at him, catching sight of Noah's ears slightly red under the flickering streetlights. That was when I noticed how long and curled his eyelashes were, and how his bright, lively eyes made it hard for me to look away. I don't know why, but I suddenly thought of a child eagerly waiting for a Christmas gift, eyes full of hope and innocent joy. I gave a vague answer, my voice soft but with a hint of promise. "Just wait. It'll be soon." The story between me and Noah Carter felt like a dramatic chapter straight out of a novel, one he'd written himself. That day, during a long flight, I happened to read a detective novel that blew me away and ended up diving into all the author's other works. The more I read, the more I was hooked by the sharp writing and unpredictable twists. Each line pulled me into a world of mystery. When the author, who went by the pen name Wanderer, had a new book signing in the city, I went to Barnes & Noble to check it out. I assumed he'd be some middle-aged man. His style was so mature and profound. But when I walked in, I saw a young guy in his early 20s, shockingly handsome. That face alone could have made him a celebrity. Bright smile, intelligent eyes. That man was Noah Carter. I casually asked, curious. In Shadow of Truth, the killer didn't actually do it for his mother, did he? Noah immediately looked up, eyes lighting up with excitement. "You figured that out?" He dove straight into an animated discussion about the plot, his voice quick, passionate, like he'd found a kindred spirit after years of searching. We talked so much we lost track of time. Until his assistant coughed from behind and gently reminded, "Mr. Carter, there are still many people waiting." Only then did Noah reluctantly hand the book to me. He winked, a playful smile glinting in his clear eyes. When I opened the book later, besides his flowing signature, there was also a handwritten number, his phone number. After that, everything unfolded naturally. At first, we just discussed storylines, exchanging thoughts through messages. Then we started realizing how much we clicked, from our love of books to our outlook on life. The day he confessed, his voice trembled slightly, full of sincerity. I hesitated for a moment, but told him the truth. At that point, James Sullivan and I were already falling apart. He had Lauren Hayes by his side, and the two of them were basically strangers to me. It's just that I still carried his child. Noah Carter was silent for a long time, his voice dropping low. I need time to think. 3 days later, just when I thought he'd given up, he called, his tone steady. I don't want to be a side guy. But these past 3 days, I've realized I can't get you out of my head. So now, James Sullivan had Lauren Hayes, and me, I had Noah Carter. When I got home, I saw James sitting on the sofa, looking gloomy. The man looked like he'd just had his heart broken. I understood immediately. It must have been another fight with Lauren. The usual cycle: break up, block each other, cry it out. She's used that trick about 800 times already. Lauren was James's first love. They'd known each other since they were 17, stuck to each other for 5 years. Back then, James wanted to marry her. He'd even bought the engagement ring. But for some reason, probably under the influence of his mother, she never liked Lauren. They broke up, and she started suggesting me to James instead. I was one of the students his mother had supported. From the time I was 10 until I turned 18, she consistently helped me, not just with tuition, but also living expenses. After I got into university, she still worried about every little thing. I was an orphan, had nowhere to go during Christmas, so she always invited me over for dinner. In my first year, I got a scholarship and started working, building my own path, no longer needing her financial help. But we stayed in touch. Every Christmas, I still bought gifts and came to visit. From the small convenience store I took a loan to buy out, to eventually owning a third of the commercial real estate around the university area. It took me 2 years. I made over $2 million. Maybe that was when James's mother started to see my business potential. His dad had passed away early in an accident, and his mother's health was weak. She was in and out of the hospital constantly. James himself had no business sense, and his mother constantly worried about the Sullivan family's future. Lauren studied art, and his mom believed she wouldn't be of any help to the family. So she sat me down for a long talk, hinting that I should date James, help him run the family business. I stayed silent for a long time, but eventually I nodded and agreed to try going out with James. I thought marrying James would be a way to build a stable future. I was 20 back then, ambitious and naive. Now I'm 29, and I know I was wrong. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warm yellow light from the living room cast a soft glow over James's figure, sitting alone on the sofa. He wore a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing his muscular arms, and his custom-made Italian leather shoes gleamed without a speck of dust. His face was gloomy, his eyes bloodshot. James looked up, and his sharp gaze cut straight through me. He frowned, his voice full of accusation. What did you do to upset her this time? I froze, then immediately understood. He came home to confront me about the phone call with Lauren this morning. I let out a cold laugh, crossing my arms and staring him straight in the eye. James, what is wrong with you? She called me first, bragging like a lunatic, and you don't say anything to her but turn around and blame me? His expression faltered. His eyes darted away, and his voice dropped like he was trying to keep it together. You know how she is. She's been spoiled since she was little. She's a bit emotional. So what's the harm in just letting her have her way a bit? I stood there, looking at him, feeling like an ice block was slowly sliding through my chest. Sorry, I said flatly. I grew up an orphan. No one ever taught me how to cater to spoiled rich girls. If you enjoy doing that, go ahead. I'm not interested. James's face darkened. His lips pressed tightly together, like he was swallowing something he didn't dare say out loud. You didn't have to be so harsh. I didn't bother arguing anymore. Every word would only pour fuel on the fire, and I didn't want the baby inside me to suffer because of my anger. I turned and walked away, slamming the bedroom door behind me. The sound of wood crashing against wood rang out like a declaration of the end. Lying on the bed, I looked down at my belly, already visibly rounded. My hand unconsciously rested on it, feeling the tiny thumps inside. The truth is, ever since I found out about Lauren's existence, I didn't want to keep this baby. But then the image of James's mother came to mind. The frail woman lying in her hospital bed, eyes red. She held my hand, her voice trembling, saying this child was the Sullivan family's last hope. Without her help, I'd probably still be stuck in that poor town. Maybe already a woman with several kids, living in a rundown shack, or worse, homeless and wandering. She was the one who pulled me out of my darkest days. I couldn't say no to her. This child became my final compromise, my way of repaying all the years of kindness she gave me. I made it clear to her, once I gave birth, I would divorce James. Whatever love we had, if it ever existed, had long since disappeared. Outside in the living room, I could hear James's voice, soft and gentle, like he was comforting someone over the phone. Lauren, don't be like that. His tone sweet, like coaxing a sulking child. I pulled the pillow over my head, trying to block out the sound, but it still leaked through the fabric, a cruel reminder of his betrayal. Lauren was the type who loved to create drama. I'd heard people gossiping about her even before I got involved with James. Maybe because she was spoiled growing up, she always craved attention, often threatening to break up just to test him. Every time, James was the one to back down, coaxing her like it was his life's purpose. That was one of the reasons his mother opposed their relationship. Their final breakup was the 27th one. Maybe by then, James was tired. With his mother's persuasion, for the first time, he didn't chase after her. And so they really broke up. Honestly, when I first got together with James, I hoped we could live in peace. He was very handsome, but not in the warm, bright way Noah was. James had a hardened look, sharp brows, deep-set eyes, and a sort of untamed intensity. From the outside, no one would have guessed he was someone who could be blindly devoted. At first, he kept his distance. He was cold, sometimes even resistant. But over time, things changed. We used to hold hands at the grocery store in the afternoons. At night, we'd cook together. On Valentine's Day, he booked a table at my favorite restaurant and gave me a necklace he picked out himself, his eyes shining when I opened the box. On the nights I woke from nightmares, he'd pull me into his arms, gently pat my back, whispering, "It's okay, I'm here." Then we'd fall asleep wrapped in each other, his breath in my hair, peaceful like a dream. There was a time I truly thought that was happiness. I believed we'd stay together forever like that. Until a year ago, when everything suddenly changed. James became irritable, easily agitated. His words turned into daggers. At first, I thought it was work stress. When I found out I was pregnant, I was even happy, thinking the baby would bring us closer. But then I discovered the truth. It wasn't stress. It was Lauren. She had come back. That's when I realized, from beginning to end, James had never really let her go. The creak of the bedroom door snapped me out of my thoughts. James pushed the door open, his tall frame filling the doorway, but his face was still clouded. He stood there, hands on his hips, looking at me lying on the bed, his voice low but heavy with pressure. "She's really upset this time. Can you just try to apologize?" In that moment, a wave of rage surged in my chest, burning so hot it felt like it could incinerate every ounce of patience I had left. I looked at him, eyes ice cold, my hand instinctively gripping the bedsheet. I genuinely wanted to grab the bedside lamp and smash it against his head to see what the hell he had going on in there. But then, the doctor's words from this morning echoed in my mind. Pregnant women should not get angry. I took a deep breath, jaw clenched so tight it hurt, trying my best to suppress the storm that was building inside me. Get out, I spat, every word sharp and unforgiving. James frowned. He took a step toward me, his voice turning colder. Sarah, that's too much. I shot up from the bed, my bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor, but the fire in me was hotter than anything. I've had enough, James, I almost shouted, pointing straight at him, my finger trembling from the emotion. When the company's in trouble, you come to me. When Lauren throws a tantrum, you come to me too. A man who lives this pathetically. Seriously, it's shameful. If you don't even know what you're doing, then don't drag me down with you. Something dark flashed across James's eyes, like my words had struck a deep, raw nerve. The veins on his arms popped, his fists clenched so tight, his knuckles turned white. For a second, I thought he might lunge at me, scream, maybe even raise a hand. But he didn't. He just stood there, frozen, his eyes like ice. A long moment passed before he finally spoke, his voice low and threatening. Sarah, don't regret this. Then he turned around and slammed the door shut with force. The sound of his leather shoes echoed down the hallway, fading away, leaving the room buried in a heavy silence. I sat back down on the bed, my arms wrapped around my belly, feeling the tiny heartbeat inside like a reminder that I needed to stay calm. But inside, I couldn't stop replaying what had just happened. This wasn't the first time James had asked me to apologize to Lauren. Every time she threw a fit, every time she called to provoke me, and I responded, he turned on me, like I was the one ruining their happiness. Lauren, she had nothing left but James. In the years she was abroad, her family collapsed after her father was jailed for illegal fundraising. From a spoiled little princess, she was now left with only James, the man who was married to me. So she clung to him, became his mistress, and occasionally called to provoke me, trying to push me into filing for divorce. But I didn't play along. Every time she called, I shot back directly, made her furious. When James couldn't calm her down, he'd turn on me, saying I owed his mother, saying I needed to keep the peace, for the sake of the Sullivan family. He knew I could hardly say no, because of how much his mother had done for me back then. But he was wrong. I don't owe the Sullivan family anything anymore. All these years, I'm the one who pulled their company back from the edge of ruin. When I stepped in, the business was drowning in debt. Employees were quitting left and right. Shareholders had lost faith. I worked day and night, negotiated with partners, slashed expenses, expanded the market. From a near-defunct company on its last legs, Sullivan has now risen bright and powerful, the business expanding nonstop, claiming a quarter of the entire industry. Frankly, if it weren't for me, the Sullivan family would have lost everything a long time ago. The next morning, I walked into the company, and the familiar atmosphere of the office suddenly felt suffocating and strange. Every employee who passed me in the hallway snuck glances at me, eyes filled with awkwardness and hesitation. One quickly bowed his head in greeting. Another turned her face away, her footsteps quicker than usual. I could feel all those stares stabbing into my back like tiny needles, and instinctively, I tightened my grip on my handbag. When I reached the office door, the scene before me made my heart sink. My belongings, books, documents, family photos, were thrown carelessly all over the floor, scattered like trash. My favorite mug, the white porcelain one with cherry blossoms James's mother gave me last year, was shattered into tiny pieces. I stood there frozen, blood rushing to my face, my voice turning cold like ice. What is this? The door opened, and someone I never expected stepped out. Lauren Hayes. She stood there in a tight red dress, curled hair draped over her shoulders, glancing nonchalantly at the mess on the floor before letting out a sneering smile, the corner of her lips lifting with mockery. Just helping you clear out your office, she said casually, her voice light but full of provocation. With that big belly, it must be inconvenient. I'm just being helpful, I stood frozen, staring at her in disbelief. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice trembling slightly with the fury rising inside me. Lauren leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smiling smugly. You didn't know? Classic James, forgetting to mention things like this. She paused, savoring the moment, then continued, her tone light, but to me, it landed like a lightning strike. Sarah Thompson, James already reassigned you. You're no longer the CEO of Stellar. You can pack up and go. My voice shot up in shock. Reassigned me? Then who's the new CEO? A ridiculous suspicion flashed in my mind. So absurd I didn't dare believe it, yet it clung to me like a nightmare. Lauren clearly enjoyed the look on my face. Her eyes sparkled with triumph as she walked over and flipped the nameplate on the desk. I only mentioned it in passing, and he immediately moved you. She smirked, stepping closer, her voice low and laced with venom. Sarah, did you really think you could hold on to his money? Let me tell you, don't expect to keep a damn thing. It was laughable. I turned to look at the people around us, employees and colleagues I'd worked with for years, all with discomfort written on their faces, eyes avoiding mine, lips pressed tight. But not one of them spoke up. The silence was stifling. Just then, James appeared, tall in his usual black suit, his face indifferent to the point of cruelty. He stopped beside Lauren, hands in his pockets, as if everything was unfolding exactly as he'd planned. James, what is this supposed to mean? I stepped toward him, my voice filled with outrage. He looked at me, eyes unmoved, his tone calm, like he was talking about the weather. I'm thinking of what's best for you. You're pregnant now. It's inconvenient to work. Let Lauren help out, so you can rest at home. I stared at him in disbelief, my mouth falling open. Her! You're replacing me with her? She studied art. Are you trying to bankrupt Stellar? The Southern Suburbs development project with the city is still waiting on me. If you remove me, what's going to happen to that deal? James crossed his arms, his tone full of contempt, his eyes scanning me up and down like evaluating a defective product. Sarah, you really think too highly of yourself. You think without you the company can't run? Before you came, Stellar was doing just fine, wasn't it? That's when it hit me. So this was revenge for not apologizing to Lauren yesterday. Or maybe they'd been planning this for a while, waiting for the right moment to kick me out. James, I said, trying to stay calm though my voice trembled. Doing this will ruin Stellar. You can't be that irresponsible, ruin Stellar, he scoffed, giving me another cold once-over. I think you just can't let go of power. Ever since you joined the company, who even remembers I'm the owner? To everyone, it's just CEO Sarah. I swear you were about to change the company's name to Thompson Corp. I stood there, stunned, staring at James, his eyes burning with resentment. So that's what it was. In his eyes, I'd overshadowed him, stolen the spotlight he thought belonged to him. But I never wanted that. James's mother brought me into Stellar to support and protect him, and yet, all these years, he was too busy drinking, racing cars with his rich buddies, completely ignoring the business. I tried to talk sense into him, but he'd snap, irritated. I've got a degree, what do I need you for? My mom brought you into the company to work for me, remember? With no other choice, I carried Stellar on my own. Those years, the company declined day by day, cash flow unstable, major clients leaving one after another. I had to go door to win them back, bowing, begging, my voice pleading. Sometimes I had to drink with shady, arrogant clients, obese, sleazy, reeking of lies. No one helped me. Even now, when I think about it, I still can't believe I got through those years alone. Let's be clear, without me, there would never be the Stellar we see today. Strong, expansive, stock soaring. And now, after using me up, James throws me out like an old tool. I couldn't hold it in. I laughed, cold and sharp, echoing through the quiet hallway. A few employees turned their heads, startled. I took a step back, my voice steady but laced with scorn. James, does Eleanor Bennett know you're doing this? His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of panic crossing his eyes. But it vanished quickly, replaced by anger. He shouted, his voice ringing out. This is the Sullivan estate. This is my company. I don't have to report to anyone. Lauren stood smugly beside him, half smiling with mockery, her eyes gleaming with victory. Sarah, who do you think you are? She stepped forward, voice dripping with contempt. You're just a cheap little worker. Pack your crap and get lost. I stared at the man in front of me, the one who used to be my husband, the one who used to hold me through endless nights, and for a long moment, I stood frozen, feeling like my heart had been ripped apart. Then suddenly, I laughed, a bitter, cutting laugh. All right, James. Well done, I'm leaving. Leaving the company, I stepped onto the street. The noise of the city rushed into my ears, but everything around me felt blurry and distant. The phone in my bag buzzed nonstop, one call after another from senior executives, people I had worked side by side with for years. I glanced at the screen, saw their names flashing, but my hands trembled as I picked up. A deputy director's voice came through, filled with guilt. Sarah, James called an emergency meeting this morning. We tried to object, but he dismissed everything. We didn't agree, but I hung up before he could finish. I didn't want to hear more. I wandered aimlessly down the sidewalk, feet heavy, mind blank. A short while later, a sharp pain suddenly stabbed through my belly, so intense it felt like a knife. I had to stop, clutching my abdomen, cold sweat breaking out across my skin. I could feel something was wrong, a vague, growing fear. I looked down and saw a bright red stain spreading across my dress. When I was wheeled into the operating room, the doctor shook his head, voice grave. We may not be able to save the baby. I lay there, body numb from the medication, but my heart felt like it was being ripped apart. I tried to call James, not because I expected anything from him, but because this baby, he had a right to know. The phone rang for a while before he picked up. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it still trembled. James, I'm at the hospital. The doctor said, we might lose the baby. There was silence for a few seconds on the other end. Then he let out a dry laugh, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Sarah, since when did you start playing the cry, scream, threaten to die game? You think using the baby to guilt trip me is going to get you back in? I quietly ended the call, slowly placing my hand over my stomach, feeling the emptiness spreading inside. Truth is, ever since Lauren came back, I had stopped expecting anything from this baby. Sometimes I even saw it as a humiliation, a constant reminder that from beginning to end, my husband only loved someone else. But day by day, as I felt it grow inside me, that miraculous connection of blood and flesh made it impossible to let go. I had once thought, if James didn't want it, I'd take the baby and go. This child had stayed with me all this time, it was mine. I closed my eyes, a single hot tear rolling down my cheek. When I opened them, the first face I saw was Noah Carter's, worried and exhausted. He carefully walked beside the doctor as I was wheeled into the recovery room, gently holding my hand like he was afraid I'd disappear. I didn't even need to be hospitalized for long, but he insisted, convincing the doctor to keep me one more day for monitoring. The next morning, when I was discharged, Noah was firm about taking me to his home, his voice full of concern. That man, his brow furrowed, and a flash of anger crossed his face at the mention of James. He won't take care of you. I want to be with you, I thought for a moment, looked into his sincere eyes, and nodded. The truth is, I rarely show weakness. Life had always been harder for me than most, and I'd gritted my teeth and kept going. But somehow, I could endure everything when I was alone. It's only when someone truly loves me that I soften. I really didn't want to go back to that empty house by myself again. When we arrived at Noah's place, I thought his idea of taking care was just a comforting phrase. He came from a wealthy family, even better off than James's, but he chose to write novels instead of joining the business world. And he was wildly successful. 3 of his books had been adapted into films, all grossing over $200 million, with best-selling rights and a name known across the industry. Someone like that? How could he possibly be good at taking care of anyone? But I was wrong. Every meal, Noah personally cooked. The dishes weren't fancy, but surprisingly delicious, especially his chicken noodle soup. The noodles chewy, the broth rich with slow-cooked chicken, and the vegetables crisp and sweet. "How are you so good at this?" I asked in surprise, a bit of soup still on my lips. Noah leaned on his elbow, smiling at me. The warm yellow kitchen light poured over his dark hair, tinting it a soft gold. His dining table wasn't large. We sat close, close enough that he could reach out and touch my hair. "I wanted to take care of you," he said, winking, his lips curling into a playful smile like a kid showing off. I was about to laugh, but then memories of the years with James flashed through my mind. He didn't know how to cook, or rather, he couldn't handle anything involving taking care of someone else. Back then, I didn't feel much. I told myself I needed financial security, and compared to those hungry childhood days, what I had was already enough. It wasn't until now that I realized being cared for, being cherished, was its own kind of happiness. In the days that followed, being removed from Stellar didn't hurt the way I thought it would. I devoted 9 years of my life to it, pulled it back from the edge of collapse. Stellar had been like my child. I'd grown used to the endless travel, constant phone calls, back-to-back meetings. And yet, in these last few days, suddenly having nothing to do felt strangely comforting. During the day, Noah liked to sit in his study and write, fingers flying across his laptop as sunlight poured through the curtains onto his focused face. The floor was covered in thick, soft rugs, and the faint scent of old books filled the air. On sunny days, I'd curl up in the beanbag next to him with a book in hand, the sound of pages turning gently filling the room. Sometimes we'd argue fiercely about a plot twist, bickering all morning, laughter echoing off the walls. In the afternoon, we napped together. The curtains drawn tight, darkness blanketed the room, and everything felt so still. He'd wrap his arms around me from behind, warm breath against my neck, and we'd sleep until 3. After writing a bit more, we'd go grocery shopping, hand in hand. He'd push the cart while I picked fresh vegetables. After dinner, we'd watch a movie together. For the first time in my life, I had days like this. No arguments, no power games. Just being together was enough. Sometimes, lying beside him, listening to his steady heartbeat, I felt this happiness was so fragile it couldn't be real, like a dream that could shatter at any moment. That night, while I was lying in Noah Carter's arms watching a movie, my phone suddenly rang. It was James's mother calling. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up. Eleanor's voice came through, barely suppressing her fury. "I heard that bastard reassigned your position?" I was stunned. This was the first time I had ever heard her curse. Her voice was sharp, trembling with anger. Eleanor had always been a refined woman, soft-spoken, and yet now I could feel the fire in her through every word. "I just gave him a piece of my mind, but this time he's adamant about his decision." She paused, trying to steady her breathing, heavy exhales crackling through the phone. "Sarah, don't be upset. Let me come back." It was clear she was truly furious, her voice rising, like she was ready to burst through the phone and confront James herself. I looked over at Noah. He was sitting beside me, gently holding my hand, eyes full of concern as he quietly listened. In that moment, all the bitterness and resentment I had felt about being thrown out of Stellar suddenly faded, like a gust of wind had blown away the fog. I took a breath, my voice calm but resolute. "No need, Mom. I haven't even told you yet. On the same day I was reassigned, I also lost the baby. I'm going to divorce James." The line went silent, the pause so long it became suffocating. I could almost hear her heartbeat through the phone. Heavy, aching. This was something we had once discussed. She had supported me for 9 years, and I had helped James carry Stellar for 9 years. The baby had been the last remaining tie, the promise I made to her, and now even that was gone. It was time for me to leave. We both knew I wasn't coming back. After a long while, her voice broke, trying to force a smile, but unable to hide the trembling. Don't worry, everything that's rightfully yours. I won't let you lose a single cent. From now on, she choked up, a small sob slipping through the line. From now on, just live a good life. I pressed my lips together, my eyes stinging, but I didn't let myself cry. Thank you, Mom, I whispered, then ended the call, still clutching the phone in my hand like it held the last bit of warmth from her. Noah pulled me into his arms, his hand gently stroking my hair, saying nothing, just holding me tightly, as if trying to shield me from the entire world. A few minutes later, the phone vibrated again. This time, it was James. His voice burst out, furious. Sarah, you lost the baby and didn't tell me? I let out a cold laugh, my voice sharp as a blade. James, if there's something wrong with your brain, go get it checked. I didn't tell you? You really forgot what you said with your own mouth? He was speechless for a moment, his voice shrinking, as if scrambling for an excuse. You thought I was using the baby to threaten you? Thought I was clinging to my position at the company? I cut him off, each word stabbing into him like a knife. James, go ahead and hold on to your precious title. I'll be watching to see how Stellar collapses. You'll regret destroying everything your father left behind. With that, I hung up decisively and tossed the phone onto the sofa. The soft thud echoed in the quiet room. I wasn't always like this. I used to be gentle, used to indulge James without conditions. But he pushed me, step by step, cornering me, until I had no choice but to become the cold, unyielding woman I am now. A week later, I pushed open the door to the house that used to be my home. A week at Noah's had helped me regain my composure. But the moment I stepped in here, all the old memories came rushing back like sharp fragments. James was sitting on the sofa, wearing a wrinkled gray dress shirt, his once polished Italian leather shoes now scuffed with dust. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot, voice low and filled with remorse. That day, I'm sorry. I didn't expect. I said nothing, just stood there, gripping the strap of my handbag tightly, my eyes passing over him like looking at a stranger. The truth is, I felt there was nothing left to say between us. No matter how sincere his apology might be, it couldn't erase the wounds he left behind. I walked to the table, pulled a folder from my bag, and placed the divorce agreement in front of him. James froze, eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He suddenly looked up, voice rising in shock. Sarah, you want to divorce me? Yes. I glanced at my phone to check the time, as if I were doing something completely routine. He flipped through the agreement in a hurry, fingers trembling as he skimmed each page, his face growing darker with every second, like he'd just been doused in cold water. Is it because of your lover? He growled, eyes flashing with a mix of anger and pain. I laughed, a short, mocking laugh. Too tired to argue, I simply nodded. Yes. James suddenly shot up from the sofa, his steps unsteady, his face pale. Did you forget that you're already married? He shouted, pointing at me, the veins in his neck bulging. Does he even know you have a husband? I stared him straight in the eye, the smile on my lips turning sharper. Of course he knows. And you're married too, aren't you? Lauren never cared that you had a wife. He choked on his words, his face growing uglier, lips pressed tightly, as if he were trying to swallow something bitter. I tilted my head, voice calm but laced with sarcasm. What's wrong? You don't want a divorce now? What's Lauren supposed to do then? James glanced at me, eyes full of frustration, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. We're not even at that point yet. Suddenly, he stepped forward, gripping my shoulders tightly, so hard it made me flinch from the pain. Sarah, where will you go if you leave the Sullivan family? What else can you do? You're going to throw away everything you've built over all these years just because of one impulsive moment. Is it worth it? I slowly pushed his hands off me. Looking him straight in the eyes, I said, Aren't you the one who forced me to give it all up? You kicked me out of Stellar, made me lose our child. James, wasn't everything I lost taken by you? So what are you pretending for now? He was stunned into silence, standing frozen like a statue, his eyes flickering with panic. After a long pause, he stammered, voice shaking, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. That's not true. Sarah, didn't you still love me? All these years, you never let go. How can you just walk away now? I smiled, a soft, bitter smile, like a breeze full of sorrow. You think I stayed all these years because I loved you? I paused, looking deep into his eyes, each word like a dagger to the heart. James, I wanted to divorce you the moment I found out you were cheating. I stayed because Eleanor supported me for 9 years, and I helped you revive Stellar for 9 years. That term is now over. I slid the divorce agreement toward him, my fingertip brushing the paper like touching the door to my own freedom. James, I don't owe your family anything anymore. He went still, his hands falling to his sides, eyes blank as he stared at the agreement on the table, like the entire world had just collapsed beneath him. You? What did you say? His voice trembled, weak, like a man who'd just lost everything. I said, I repeated, each word crystal clear. Time's up, James. Let's get divorced. That day, the argument from the day before had led nowhere. James stubbornly refused to get a divorce. I packed my things and moved out of the villa, settling in at Noah's place. Even though I had left Stellar, old friends from the company still kept in touch often, their voices filled with frustration over the phone. Sarah, that new director, didn't she only get the position because of Chairman James? We sent her the financial report, and she didn't understand a thing. It's unbearable. I pressed my lips together, set down my cup of tea, my eyes drifting toward the window, where sunlight filtered through the trees. Before I could respond, she went on, her voice rising with irritation. She only shows up briefly each day, and when we need her to sign documents, she's nowhere to be found. The last project had already been approved, and she made us redo it from scratch. There's no time left. I looked down, my fingers unconsciously tapping the table. Lauren had studied art. Management, to her, was like a book written in a foreign language. And James? He wasn't much better. A man used to relying on others, never lifting a finger when it came to serious work. With Stellar in their hands, I knew it wouldn't last long. Sure enough, less than 2 months later, while Noah and I were preparing divorce paperwork for court, my phone rang again. This time it was my former assistant. His voice so panicked it bordered on frantic. Sarah, something huge has happened at Stellar. He nearly shouted into the phone, breathless. Lauren ignored everyone's objections and bought a bundle of bad assets. We all disagreed, so she went to James, and he approved it right away. I listened, my heart tightening, though I wasn't surprised. His voice brimmed with disdain and fury. She didn't even read it carefully, only found out later that all the land was already mortgaged. Now the whole thing can't move forward, and the funding chain's already broken. Sarah, what do we do now? I let out a bitter laugh, my eyes meeting Noah's across the table. He had stopped typing and was looking at me with concern. I'm not a magician who can fix everything, I replied, my tone calm but tinged with pain. They'll just have to deal with it. Stellar now was completely chaotic, like a ship that had lost its course. From what my former colleagues told me, Lauren and James were now turning on each other. Back when I was still there, I handled everything, from negotiating with partners and balancing finances to resolving problems big and small. James got to enjoy the perks, while Lauren simply played the role of the hidden mistress. But now, having to carry the load themselves, they finally saw how hard it really was. And then, just like a predictable act, the familiar scene unfolded. They broke up, right there in the company office. That day, the argument from yesterday hadn't gone anywhere. James was dead set against the divorce. I packed up my things and moved out of the villa, settling in at Noah's. Even though I had left Stellar, My old friends at the company still kept calling, their voices filled with frustration. Sarah, that new director only got the position because of Chairman James, right? We send her financial reports, and she doesn't understand a thing. It's unbearable. I pressed my lips together, set my teacup down, my eyes drifting out the window where sunlight streamed through the leaves. Before I could respond, she continued, sounding even more annoyed. She only shows up briefly each day, and when we need paperwork signed, we can't even find her. The last proposal had already been approved, and now she wants us to redo it from scratch. How are we supposed to make the deadline? I lowered my eyes, my fingers unconsciously tapping the table. Lauren had studied art. Managing a company to her was like reading a book in a foreign language. And James wasn't any better. A man used to leaning on others, never lifting a finger for anything important. With Stellar in their hands, I knew it wouldn't survive long. Sure enough, not even 2 months later, when Noah and I were preparing documents for the divorce hearing, my phone rang again. This time it was my former assistant. His voice panicked. Sarah, something major just happened at Stellar, he practically shouted, his breath heavy. Lauren pushed through the purchase of a bunch of toxic assets, even though everyone objected. We all said no, but she went straight to James, and he approved it. I listened, my chest tightening, but I wasn't surprised. His voice was filled with both disgust and anger. She didn't even read the details carefully and only realized later that all the land was already mortgaged. Now they can't move forward, and the capital chain is completely broken. Sarah, what do we do? I let out a bitter laugh, glancing over at Noah. He was sitting across from me, his fingers frozen over the keyboard, eyes full of concern. I'm not a witch who can save everything, I said calmly, but there was a trace of bitterness in my voice. They'll just have to deal with it. Stellar was now completely in disarray, like a ship that had lost its direction. From what I heard from former colleagues, Lauren and James were now turning on each other. Back when I was still there, I handled everything. Negotiating with partners, balancing finances, solving problems big and small. James just enjoyed the benefits, and Lauren stayed in the shadows, playing the role of the sweet little mistress. But now that they had to shoulder the responsibility themselves, they finally saw how hard it really was. And just like that, the familiar drama played out again. They broke up, right there in the company office. Stellar eventually collapsed completely, acquired by a large regional corporation. I heard the news through a call from my former assistant, his voice full of bitterness, like he was talking about the death of a close friend. What surprised me was that after turning against James, Lauren handed over all the trade secrets she had, figures, contracts, plans I had carefully built, to our competitor. That act was the final blow, shattering Stellar's last chance of revival. From then on, James and Lauren officially tore apart their so-called love. James used the excuse of breach of confidentiality to sue her, and Lauren was sentenced to 3 years in prison. James, who had no real grasp of how to run a business, still couldn't let go of Stellar. He sold everything he owned, the old paintings, the expensive car, even mortgaged the villa where his mother lived. He poured all his money into the company, desperately trying to save it. But it was like pouring water into a bottomless pit. Stellar was gone, and so was his wealth. A year later, I founded my own company, still in the same line of business as Stellar, but this time everything felt lighter. The team was made up of former colleagues, people who had stood by me through tough times. They came into the new office with bright smiles, coffee cups in hand, voices full of excitement. Sarah, let's start over, someone said, and we sat around the meeting table, mapping out plans. Soon the company was running smoothly. Orders came in regularly, and the office was filled again with the sounds of ringing phones and typing keyboards, no longer burdened by the past, only free to create and grow. Noah Carter's book was also released, a detective novel interwoven with romance, a departure from his usual style. Online, fans buzzed with chatter, comments poured in. Wanderer added romance this time. It's so sweet, someone wrote, and I smiled holding the book in my hand, the soft blue cover, the first page bearing a line in italics. I dedicate this book to the love of my life. Noah sat next to me on the couch, his hand gently brushing the pages, his voice a whisper. You know, this one's about you. I leaned my head on his shoulder, felt the steady rhythm of his breathing, and for the first time, I truly felt free. Not shackled by the past anymore, just surrounded by peaceful days where I could sit by the window, look out into a lush green garden, holding a warm cup of tea, letting the breeze carry the scent of flowers into my chest, gently erasing old wounds. I turned to him, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a new beginning." He gave my hand a soft squeeze, his eyes shimmering, and we just sat there, quietly, letting time pass in peace. And in those moments, I realized that freedom isn't about running away from old wounds, but softly letting them drift away, like fallen leaves on the surface of a still lake, so that our hearts can heal, can truly live in the calm of the present, and be loved without fear.